My next guest is Danny Bauer. Danny was on the podcast in February of 2021. He was on episode 42, and this is his second time as a guest, and we're here to talk about his new book, Build Leadership Momentum. And Danny and I have been connected for a number of years. And just to let you know, if you're not familiar with Danny's work, he is a principal development and retention expert. He is a best-selling author. We're going to hear about his third book, and he's a host of two of the world's most downloaded podcasts. And as a Chief Ruckus Maker, he founded Better Leaders, Better Schools in 2015. Welcome to the podcast, Danny.
Dana, good to see you, and thanks for having me back. Have there been other repeat guests on the Out of the Trenches podcast? I'm just curious.
Yes, I think you're the fourth repeat guest.
Have there been anybody on there 3 times?
Not a third, no. So
not yet. Challenge accepted.
Yeah. So maybe we'll talk about another book that's in the works when that comes out as well. So
sure, for sure.
So you said you might have a trench story. We talked about your original trench story when we had our first episode, but maybe something that's happened in the past few years, maybe in relation to your writing process. What's a time that you felt was difficult that you managed to work through?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many. I mean, there's always trench stories, and I like that you call them trench stories. You know, they're not failures. You get knocked down, you get back up, you always learn something and should be a new and better person as a result. That's my philosophy. So I don't know. I mean, the best-selling book, my second book, was Mastermind Unlocking Talent Within Every School Leader. You've been an awesome mastermind member for years, and that's become my life's work. That book was published with Corwin and the National Superintendents Association, and it talks about why our space is supportive, right? Why it's so helpful for school leaders. And we have a process called the ABCs of powerful professional development. So something special happens when you integrate intentionally authenticity, belonging, and challenge. So where's the trench story? Well, all the early drafts were garbage. They sucked, Dana. They were bad. They were very bad. And the lesson there is I was actually trying to write to too many audiences, right? I was trying to write to leaders about why the experience works. And that's eventually what the book became. But I also was trying to write to districts or like edupreneurs who wanted to start masterminds and what are like the nuts and bolts of how to run it. And that's a different topic. Why it works and how to run them and grow them and be successful at that. Those are 2 different topics. And that's why the book sucked. And my editor was telling me, Danny, your book sucks. Like, it needs to be better. And so what am I going to do? I am knocked down. I'm in a trench. And I realized that the path to creating a better book was to stop writing, right? So what did I do instead of write? Well, I only live a few blocks from Syracuse's Berry Park, which my sidekick, Alba, that's one of her favorite places to be. Alba's a dog, by the way. And anyways, we were out there taking our usual walks, or she likes to run with me too. And I was just clearing my mind and making space, creating space, right, for me to figure out how to create a better book. And I realized, I don't actually have a framework in the book. And if I could figure out what the framework is of why the mastermind works, because for me, it was like riding a bike, just natural after running it for years. Okay, for a novice person, like, what are the steps? What's the framework? I got it. And I thought, can I connect it to education? Can I do something fun with the ABCs? And that's where that framework was birthed out of, the ABCs of Powerful PD. I shared it with Ariel, who is my editor of the bestseller. She's like, that's it, right? Do that for the book. Introduction, the problem with current models of PD. What's ABC? And a conclusion, there's your book. We did that. It obviously worked because it sold a lot of copies. It became a bestseller. And that was from very bad book and feedback that the book sucked to bestseller, right there in a trench. from.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about kind of when we recorded your first episode on the Out of the Trenches podcast. That was back in September of 2020, and I'm kind of trying to think, because your book didn't come out until I think like September of 21. So
Maybe,
where
yeah.
were you in that process of throwing out the drafts? Had you already gone through this conversation with your editor when you had that recording in September of 2020?
I really enjoyed my life to this point, Dana, and I can't remember that far back
Okay.
due to decisions I've
Yeah,
made.
sure. No, I get it.
But
I get it.
probably September. By then the book was probably I was pretty good and done, and I remember that there was a long time of giving it to Corwin, them putting the final touches, cover design,
Mhm.
book layout, and then actually we were going to release it. We were supposed to release it actually, I think like 3 or 4 months. I could be wrong, but it was supposed to be earlier, and it got
Okay.
pushed back and pushed back. So yeah, probably at that point it was from my end probably done.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember like you talking about just how you were trying to, I remember a little bit of our conversation, how you were trying to get some of those nuts and bolts together and make it clearer to the audience, like you said, trying to
Okay.
really identify that audience who you're talking to. Since you work with such a variety of people, both edupreneurs, principals, superintendents, and
Yeah.
people who've maybe retired who are consulting as well, I think have taken
Yeah.
the mastermind model and work with their cohorts. So let's just talk
Mm.
about your new book, Build Leadership Momentum. So much of this book talks about building positive culture, setting the stage for success for the first 90 plus days of a new or continuing principal's job. It talks about delegating tasks to create a extraordinary culture.
Mm.
And it's also a short and easy read, in my opinion. So my book, Out of the
Yeah.
Trenches, Stories of Resilient Educators, is pretty short and easy. So your book as well is something that principals can pick up and they can share with their team, and they can work through some of those points. So talk to me a little bit about perhaps a new principal who is taking over for somebody, maybe who's left the
Okay.
school with poor culture, where there's a little staff to staff or a little admin to staff connections.
Yeah. So taking over, I think this book is really going to help out. My goal was, like you said, a short and easy, but in depth, coverage of the concept. And I wanted to deliver a result in as few words as possible. Right.
Mhm.
So what I really try to frame and tell people is, if you can gift yourself 3 hours of deep work strategic time, you can literally read the book in an hour, and then you can have 2 hours right after that to implement the template, the framework, the process that I teach there. And if you're a brand new school leader, and I think this is coming out May or June or whatever,
Mhm.
you've landed that role, you're walking into your new school, and what is the first 90 days, right? How are you going to
Mhm.
set the tone? This book shows you how. And what's wild is when I wrote it at the time, uh, there really wasn't any books out there. There were a few. I had to search like nobody's business to find the books. They weren't easy to
Mhm.
find. Now there's my book, and there's one by some Harvard researchers that's like 300 pages long. But who's got time to read? And
Mhm.
it's going to be fairly academic. You know me, conversational, to
Mhm.
the point, engaging, and you can apply the idea to get a result. So yeah, if you're a new principal taking over for somebody, this is your blueprint on how to have a successful school year. And what I will say too is, so the content from the book came from an online challenge where people signed up for like 5 or 6 days. I really worked hard. Like, I love to say my free stuff's better than most of my competitors' paid stuff. But for 5 or 6 days, for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, I did group coaching calls on a back to school boot camp on how to create your entry
Mhm.
plan. And people got so much value from that, school leaders, I decided, oh, let me just turn this into a book, which I did. One of those people, his name is John Unger, who's a principal
Mhm.
down in Arkansas. And when I was interviewing him, like, what was life like before the entry plan and after? He said, Danny, before the entry plan, I was up all night just stressed out, thinking about all the things that need to happen before the start of a school year. When I implemented your template, all the stress was gone. That's what John told me. So I think not only do you get this solid entry plan template, how to, create it, you also get a stress-free start to the school year. Sounds kind of nice to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also people who may be building on an entry plan that maybe their predecessor used, or if they're taking over, if they're moving from the AP role to the principal role. But this also is a way of looking at it differently. So maybe what are some of the tips that you give for principals who want to maybe change things up, like you call your followers ruckus makers? So a ruckus maker principal who is not wanting to follow the status quo of regular entry plans that have been kind of used and recycled year to year.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity, right? I mean, something that every ruckus maker realizes is that they have a lot of power. They just might forget how much power they have. And we're all playing a type of game. And it's a lot more enjoyable if you define the rules of that game versus allowing somebody else to define those rules for you. So what this book will do is give you a pretty blank canvas to paint upon, and generally sort of tell you the boundaries, right? So the framework is about investing in yourself, thinking about your communication, followed by academics, culture, and operations. So those are sort of like of a basketball court, what's inbounds and out of bounds. But how you play the game inside of that is up to you. Now, of course, we give suggestions. But yeah, as a ruckus maker, you're constantly challenging the status quo. There are a million ways you can do it. I don't know. I don't want to give away all the content of the book, but something you will get is a back to school type of survey you can use with your staff, and the exact questions that ask during those one-on-ones, if you're doing one-on-ones with all your staff in the first 90 days. And my take on that isn't so much about like, what's your goal? How are you going to grow as a teacher? Everybody asks that, but it's actually getting to know people as human beings. And I think that is a ruckus maker way of doing it, because it's out of the norm. People are usually building walls and trying to keep professional and personal more distant. And what I'm saying is show people that you care, show people that you're interested in their lives. Here's the script. Here's the exact questions to ask. And if you do that and then follow up, and you could really do something special on your campus.
Yeah, it's not just about doing the survey and asking staff what their favorite candy bar is, but it's actually following through with that and helping people feel like they matter, right? We're recording just after Teacher Appreciation Week, and it's fine and dandy to like do that whole bulk, like breakfast or the bulk of the nachos, but like when you get an individual gift for Teacher Appreciation Week, really you feel appreciated. But when it's the whole bulk and the whole staff is getting the same thing, it really doesn't feel that individualized. So,
in those weeks, I mean, honestly, those weeks like exist and that kind of thing, because it's not happening all the time. So flip the model. What if Teacher Appreciation Week was every week except that week? Like, how would that change your approach? That's how a ruckus maker thinks, So honestly, like, you don't need those type of weeks or to do things on those days if you're showing people you care all the time.
Yeah. So you also talk about scaling up operations, but paring those down. So talk a little bit about how you would pare that down. Like you said, John Unger, his stress level was lower, right? When you have all these things to do as a principal. So talk about what you mean with that.
Well, a big idea, right, is everything can't be included in a 90-day plan. And I give you that framework of those 5 buckets, to focus on. And the goal isn't to jam everything into those first 90 days. And so therefore you get focus. The idea is less is more, right? I think it was Antoine Saint-Exupéry who said, perfection comes not when there's anything more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. In the book, I share a story of Dr. Seuss, who in 1960, Random House basically challenged him to make a book with just 50 words. And if he did so, he could earn a smashing $50, right? Well, what came out of that was the book Green Eggs and Ham. It sold over 200 million copies. So we could say it's been pretty successful. And basically, I think it was like 49 one syllable words, and the 50th word had 3 syllables, which was anywhere, right? But he met it. Constraints are a beautiful thing. Playing within boundaries actually challenges to be way more creative, right? So that's kind of what I mean about scaling up to pare down. The last thing I'll say, and this is not in the book, this is a personal practice of mine, but I like to try to do things that don't scale, right? So I do have a dream of, within our leadership community, the Ruckus Maker Mastermind, of serving 5,000 leaders, right? That's crazy. It sounds crazy maybe, but that's actually only 5% of all the principals in the United States and Canada. Now it seems very doable. But what I'm saying about things that don't scale, at least right now, when people order a book, for example, I sign that book and I send it to them, right? If I sold 200 million copies like Dr. Seuss of Green Eggs and Ham, I couldn't sign every book and send them out. But at least right now, it's a great way to do a small, and I might even research Dana for like 2 minutes on the internet. And if I could find something interesting and relevant, I even write a little handwritten note like, hey, I saw you're doing this thing. I've got an idea for you. Here's my number. Call me, right? And so that doesn't, you can't scale that to 200 million people. But what I'll say is 100% of the people I've done that for have given me a call, and I've been able to give them a helpful idea, right? So it's up to you, the listener, how you take that concept that I just shared from a personal author point of view. But you can do that within your school as well, in terms of just being super intentional with maybe a few students or staff members, and then figuring out how to multiply those results.
Yeah, I really like just that, also personalization, like you said, for scaling it down and sending out a message. Yeah. I mean, for those people who buy the book for their team. So really that personal way of like finding out how you can help, right? I also wanted to ask a question I thought was pretty funny, kind of to ask about a book, but it's a unique question. So if your book were a joke, what would the punchline be?
Yeah, the book is a joke, right? Everything is a joke. Like I try to live by this rule number 6, which means don't take yourself too seriously. But here's the punchline, right? It's build leadership momentum, how to create the perfect principal entry plan. And from a worldview, very few principals actually have an entry plan. So when you were talking about those entry plans that are passed down and stuff, that actually is like not the norm. Most principals are handed the keys and the system says, good luck. Don't mess it up or you're fired, right? Not here's how to do it. Here's how to enter. So first of all, most people don't have an entry plan. Second of all, those that do, right, are like a part of the top 1%. And almost nobody else takes that entry plan and then says, oh, there's another 90 days ahead of me. Let me do another entry plan. And you could do that 4 times every year. There's 4 quarters. So the punchline is, not only does this help you start off the school year strong, you could redo that process every quarter, every year, for as long as you're a school leader, and you will create, back to the main title, some incredible leadership momentum that way.
Yeah, it's something that can be done as kind of a reboot when you come back from winter break and a reevaluation. You don't want to just create that plan at the beginning of the year. That's what happens sometimes. Things fall by the wayside, things change. You need to reevaluate. So, yeah.
And that's why, to be honest too, Dana, that's why like 90 days is perfect, because things
Mhm.
do change and you need to be
Yeah.
agile. So 90 days is not too long where you can't get something done. It's not too far away that you continue to punt and procrastinate, or just everything changes. And it's not too short where you feel like, oh my God, this is, impossible to do. 90 days really is the perfect segment of time to plan for
Mhm.
sure. But like
Mhm.
you said, like a winter reboot, I mean, I'll just ask you, but personally, I don't know a lot of leaders, other ones I support, but like who in your network, like, are they creating a winter entry plan?
Yeah.
No, the
Yeah.
answer, I doubt it. They're just going back to school, right?
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
2 weeks off. That was awesome. School starts again. But what does day one of winter start look like? Week one, month two, month three. Like, such an
Mm.
opportunity for leaders that want to take action on this idea.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. And just knowing the fact that this book was born from that cohort that you had with people a little over a year
Yeah, yeah.
ago, and then they joined to develop these plans, and seeing how this helps more people find out about how to create these things that can be used throughout the year, not just as you enter the job or the school year. So you have a website connected to the book, buildleadershipmomentum.com. What are some of the resources
Yeah.
one can find on that site?
It's a good question. I should pull it up and look, but it'll be interesting because I know we're recording at a specific time and this is airing later. But at least when I launched the book, there were some bonuses,
Mm,
and maybe the autographed copy will still be available. We'll see. But I'm giving that away. I have a free and how to end the year like a pro training. You definitely 100% will get the blank template and a fill one that's already completed for you in terms of a 90-day entry plan. And then there's also a 12-month principal checklist. So what are the things that you need to do, right, from August through the rest of the year, broken down by month and task, which I think is a pretty crazy resource. When you're in the book too, there's like some resources for sure that you'll get. The Ruckus Maker mindset tool, that's all about the fundamentals and getting yourself right. There's a bonus section on why communication matters. As I mentioned, the get to know you staff survey and student survey, 2 activities called taking the temperature and a belonging and othering
hmm
activity. If you want to boost your culture through this really fantastic idea in terms of staff member of the month, but I promise you, it's not the way every school does it. You get
hmm
that form. There's a delegation spreadsheet and an opportunity to join or take the delegation masterclass. So I think those are all the resources that are there. Usually on my book pages, there's an opportunity, to buy the book. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, well, actually, after you buy the book, I take that back. By the time somebody hears this episode and they purchase the book, all the bonuses get delivered automatically. You don't have to go to the website for it.
Well, those are a lot of bonuses in conjunction to buying the book and
Yeah.
going to the
I
Build
try to over
Leadership
deliver,
Momentum.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You get
Yeah.
a lot for paying very little for
15
the book.
bucks.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
really, that's yeah, for people who have not checked out some of those resources, definitely go there. And I wanted to ask about some of your speaking
Yeah.
events, conferences that you speak at. I
Okay.
know that
Yeah.
you got a few events that are planned for your mastermind members in the summer of
Yes.
24,
Ooh.
but you've already
Yeah.
spoken about that as of recording, and we also have some conferences that you'll be speaking at as well. So where might people be able to check you out in the spring or summer of 24?
I do know for a fact, because like all the national conferences, they're doing proposals right now, and it's way too early to know if I've been accepted. I do know I'm doing my 3rd live event, right? I certainly want mastermind members to be there like you, and then it'll be invited just to other awesome people that consider themselves ruckus makers, but maybe they're not in the leadership program.
Mm-hmm.
So this 3rd one is going to be in Moab, Utah. The topic is leadership confidence and how to build that and sustain it, grow it, nurture it. And it's going to be 2 days of, for sure, I haven't worked on the agenda yet, but it's 2 days to create more confidence in your leadership. But the thing that sets apart my events from anybody else's in education, and I go to them. I go to the NASSP and the NAESP and the state ones and AASA for superintendents. Not one of those has an adventure component connected to it, right? So you'll be in Denver. We haven't had it yet in terms of the recording, but as people listen, we have had it. So it's like the Matrix right now, and or Back to the Future. But the adventure experience there, right, is we're going to go whitewater rafting. And in Utah, since we're working on confidence, and since I'm actually scared of heights, we are going to rappel down canyons, right, in Moab. And listen, it's optional. There are some people who are not rafting. There'll be some people who say, okay, that's too much, Danny. I'm not willing to go rappelling. But for those with an adventurous spirit, or they want to conquer a fear, or just like create a remarkable, really epic memory, then we're going to do that. And I think you learn a lot about yourself going through those situations. You learn a lot about leadership. You can take the content, right, from the leadership event and then put it into practice literally in 72 hours. And so that's, that's kind of tough. Well, that's being a ruckus maker, right? It's not the usual event, and it's going to be awesome. So I can't tell you right now as of recording, like it's probably going to be Utah 2024, like betterleadersbetterschools.com/Utah 2024. But if people just reach out, Danny at betterleadersbetterschools.com, or call or text me 312-788-7595. I'll get you information if you want to join us. So that's a Utah event. It's going to be awesome. We always do it like sort of ish small, like Denver's 50 people, right? And there's 48 signed up. We'll sell out by the time, the event happens. So Utah will probably be 50 people. And the last thing I'll just say really quick, for those leaders really looking to take their leadership to the next level, the Ruckus Maker Mastermind is an awesome opportunity. There's other masterminds out there, but there's no other mastermind, to my knowledge, that includes 2 deep work days with your membership. And that's actually a free experience. So deep work days, when you're a mastermind member, we don't have the location for the fall one, but for actually the summer one is July 31st, the day before our big Utah event. But basically, it's a day to protect for strategic thinking, collaborate with your mastermind members, and do some live masterminding and collaborating, and implement the tools, that we teach at a deeper level. And it's free, right? You got to get there. You got to get your hotel, but we don't charge for a ticket price, and that's included in your mastermind membership. So yeah, those are some of the 2024 events I'm excited about for sure.
Yeah. And I'm excited to do more in-person events. As a recorder, we had the event in November of 21, and that was about 25 people. So these 50-person events are still small enough that you get to know people well, and
still small enough.
Take place over a few days, and you see these people, you have your group, your cohort in the mastermind, but in these events you'll meet other people who are also ruckus makers, and then you're able to communicate and build some of the vision, and whatever the theme is going to be, we'll work on that together. So so definitely people can visit your website to find out more information. Well, we've talked a lot about your new book and your trench story about when you wrote your second book, Mastermind, Unlocking School Talent Within Every School Leaders. Out of everything we talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
It's just about the intentionality, right? I don't think enough leaders create that deep work block. Like, we have these deep work days, but to have that time to really do the strategic thinking, that's where legacy, your fingerprint on campus, right? Significant work, that's where it exists. And it's so easy to get pulled into the day-to-day operations and putting out fires, right? And that's why in the entry plan framework, operations is actually last. Everybody gets to it. Most
Yeah.
people start with it and only stay there. So if you want to do something special, right? It's about blocking off that time, strategic deep work thinking. And, if you pick up the book, I think that's an excellent platform in jumping off place for thinking about starting off next school year.
Great, great. Well, where can people connect with you and find you online? You already gave us some information, but you might want to list that again in case people did not get it the first time.
Yeah, well, go to the website, betterleadersbetterschools.com. You can find me on Facebook's where I'm most active. So Danny Bauer, just, find me in Ruckus Maker, but just call or text 312-788-7595.
Great, great. Well, it was a pleasure having you back on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Dana.